Hey guys, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the BODYCHEM CAST. I'm here today with my close friend Karamo and TV host and personality of the hit TV shows Queer Eye. I'd like to welcome him, and I'm very grateful to have him on today to just talk shop about just all the things happening in the world, a little bit about him, and just we're gonna dive right into it, all right? So, Karamo,
yeah.
How are you, man?
And I'm good. You know, COVID world, but we're surviving. We're having fun. We're doing what we need to do. Glad to be here with you.
Yeah, man. I'm super happy that you're here today. That you took time out of your busy schedule, and you know,
It's not like we don't see each other almost every day because you are training me, and we do hang out. You're in my COVID bubble, so.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you allowing me within your intimate COVID bubble. You know, and I definitely would like to speak a little bit about like just some of the things that are going on like in the world today, especially with COVID.
Sure.
And what COVID I think is kind of contributing to the global kind of epidemic, not pandemic that we're in from a viral standpoint, but from I think the global psychological problems that we have in our nation and in the world, like with social distancing, and there's so many people that lack intimate human interaction. And you being who you are, I feel like you could shed a little bit of light on that.
Well, I think that, you know, this has been a moment that I'm really excited about in one way, is that it's the year 2020 has caused a lot of people to buckle down and focus on their lives, really evaluate where they are and really truly see, is this the place where I want to be, or is there change or growth that needs to happen? But on the flip side, we've also all experienced collectively a lot of trauma. And that trauma cannot even be measured yet. You know, I continuously try to discuss with people, you know, the PTSD of coronavirus or the year 2020. We haven't even started to see those effects yet. And this is outside of just being...
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So the PTSD caused from coronavirus.
Yeah.
The post-traumatic stress, and we're not even in the post-traumatic stress.
We're still in the let's try to survive and let's try to make it out. You know what I mean? At the beginning of 2021, everyone was like, it's a new year. And it's like, well, it's another day, but we're still dealing with the issues. But I think that we haven't even started to see the effects of what this year is really gonna do to us, both emotionally and mentally. Because when you start thinking about just how this year started off, the division that we had in this country, between, you know, both political parties, people saying one side is horribly wrong, the other side is saying the other side is horribly wrong. That's splitting apart families, friendships.
And it just keeps, the delta just keeps on getting bigger and bigger.
And bigger. On top of that, you mentioned this earlier, the isolation. Most people haven't had to isolate in so long. You know, isolation is something that we usually experience as a negative recourse to something we do. You were a child, they put you in a corner. Right. You did something bad, they sent you to your room. You know, you might have got a little bit too tipsy, you got put in a drunk tank alone, you know what I mean? Like anything. Isolation is usually a negative connotation attached to it. And so now we force people to be isolated on top of the division and the breakdown of their families. When you then compound that with Black Lives Matter movement and people seeing people actually die in the streets in constant heavy rotation on their social medias. That's something that we have to understand is not natural. No one ever prepared any of us to see someone die in the street on replay on our social media feeds.
Right.
And so when you take just even those three things alone, just those things, the effects of coronavirus, the post-traumatic stress disorder that we'll experience, the way that we're starting to grow and learn through this, the things that we're gaining for ourselves, it's exciting, but it's also a very scary moment in the sense of how can we help better equip more human beings to be ready for what's going to happen after we get to a place where things are back to what we consider quote unquote normal.
Our quote unquote homeostasis of what our society should and could be, I guess.
Yep.
That's actually a really good point that you make. So how would you, if you were, I know I've talked to you about this, being your friend, being in your bubble. You eventually, I remember you telling me, I don't know if this is the first time people will hear it, but you eventually want to run for office. Possibly for he'll be president. Don't worry, guys.
Possibly.
I'll be casting a vote for Karamo as president.
Possibly. It wouldn't be for president. I think we've had enough reality stars running for president. I think for me it would be more so where in the
governor,
branch, governor, senator, who knows? You know what I mean? If I could see myself doing more good than it is harm,
right?
But yeah. So your question was
pursuing something like that. You said, what are the next steps that we need to take after isolation, after seeing on social media the perpetual people dying in the street? One person dying in the street, that being George Floyd, and seeing Breonna Taylor, and videos of things that are so traumatic like that, or just in general the isolation that people have never experienced since maybe childhood, since haven't experienced since being drunk one night in college, being reprimanded, and then being dealt with by the college, essentially executive branch of them, the judicial branch. Then like, all right, you got to go. You're out of here. But what are your next logical steps of post 2020, 2021, us collectively taking everything and trying to deal with it from a management standpoint?
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons that I connect with you, not only on a friendship basis, but why I respect you, is because you come to the house and you say things all the time that I pull away. I'm a big believer that language really can inform where we're going.
Right.
And you say things like movement is medicine. You say things that I'm like, it's beautiful and they're simplistic. You're welcome. And the reason I pull these things out is because I do believe the next phase in what we're going to need to do is to really find a way of combining our physical fitness with our mental fitness. And I think about in the sense of when the new year normally starts. We just all experienced 2021, and normally when the new year starts, it's really like, I'm gonna start working on my fitness. That's when we see the gyms increase. That's when we see people signing up for trainers. That's when we see people going on diets. And they proudly proclaim that they're working on their physical fitness. It's something that we have seen for generation after generations. January 1st,
30 years.
At least for the past 30 years, where it's become such a boom. People are like, I'm gonna work on my physical fitness. And I think what needs to happen now is that people need to equally be as proud and be as diligent about talking about their mental fitness and their mental health. Because what's gonna happen now is that you're going to start needing to get back into the world and figuring out how to navigate this new world. No matter what is said on one side or the other side, all of our health has been affected by the lack of movement, the lack of the way that we've been treating our bodies. A lot of us have not been eating healthy during this time. And that then goes into the fact of our mental health combined with all the things that we just talked about that people are experiencing. And so when you can talk about your mental health in a way that is empowering, also a way that is forthcoming, I think is going to be the next step. Because what happens is, as we've seen this from soldiers who come back from war, if they are not able to express the trauma they experience, if they're not able to find some outlet to get their body moving, to release the stress, to release the anxiety, to release the tension, if they're not able to find a safe community or a safe space to talk about their feelings, talk about their anxiety, to talk about when they're feeling triggered, we see the negative effects that happen.
And this is on soldiers.
I'm talking about soldiers.
It's very ironic because my last podcast was with a former Navy SEAL, and so I don't like to say former Navy SEAL because you're always a fucking Navy SEAL. You're like, and that's the point, right? Yeah. The point is, once you go into war and you're going and you're defending the country, and you have to do what you have to do. You don't want to see one of your brothers like get shot and die, because when you lose that game of life, especially at war as a Navy SEAL, it's game over. There's no reset button.
Yeah.
And this Navy SEAL, to come back to your point, is they're always like, once you're in war, you're an adrenaline seeker. You can't take the soldier out of war and try to put him back into a normal society, because as much as I feel soldiers want that rest and relaxation, they'll come back here, they'll do what they need to do, they'll drink some beers, they'll shoot the shit with their friends, and then 3 days later, maybe a week later, ready to go back to war.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, one of the things that I feel like what you're trying to say is, we'll have to deal with 2020 and 2021 is like, how do we get back into that normal, that homeostasis of what was pre-2020?
Yeah, it's really about trying to figure out, you know, how do you truly focus on your mental health in a way that is going to allow you to grow through all of these things you've been experiencing? How does it allow you to come to a healthier baseline of what your life should be and what you desire it to be in the future? And I think that's the part where people are able to actually heal through these moments and find connection and get to that next level that we're all so hopefully striving for, that we all thought was going to happen when the election happened, that we all thought was going to happen once the year hit January 1st. All these markers that we're hoping will reset. It's really all through focusing on our mental health and focusing on what we need to do. And you're going to have to figure out, how do you navigate the new feeling that your mind and body is telling you that you're craving with what you actually know you need to do to live a healthy and functioning life to some degree.
Especially in our modern day society that keeps on evolving day after day with technology and with all the things that we have to do.
Yeah.
There's always something evolving, and something, whether it be a Facebook ad, Instagram ad, social media, and the media is just throwing it in our face day after day.
Yeah.
And I feel like it comes up, there's a lot of stuff that gets thrown at us. And we're talking about this before we went live here. And there's this documentary on Netflix called Minimalist. And it's just the accumulation of stuff that we constantly get thrown at us. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we cling to that more so than anything. So if I got this can, I put value to this can, and then I'm like, you know, I didn't drink all of this. I might have buyer's remorse because I just spent $5 on this, and I'm not going to drink it. So I hold on to it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's what happens a lot in our modern day society. And we get connected to these things that we have remorse and resent from buying because we don't actually, we valued it, and then we were like, oh shit,
yeah,
I didn't even use this.
Yeah.
So you keep it with you. And it makes life so much more cluttered and so much more diluted, rather than having less things within your life.
Yeah.
And having those less things, you can actually get more intimate, emotionally driven interaction with humans, which I think at the end of the day, I don't know if you can shed any light on this, but I think we all crave intimate human interaction.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something, again, that's been brought to the forefront of 2020, is we all lack, at least most people I think lack. I can't generalize for everybody, but a lot of people lack intimate connection with humans and don't actually want to have conversations like this.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think we've talked about at other small gatherings that we've shed light on.
Well, I think one of the things that is really important about what you brought up is there is this unfortunate desire that human beings have to collect and to gain. Part of it is biological. It's a sort of idea of like, these things will then get passed down. It's sort of a legacy, you know, it's like, what can I do? And to some small degree, that's the reason why children, you have, you know, you see larger families, the reason why you sort of collect wealth, certain things. But everything has a level where it becomes too much. And when it becomes too much, you have to say, what are you trying to replace or avoid by collecting so much?
1000%. Could you shed some light on that?
And that's really what it is where you have to say to yourself, what am I avoiding, or what is it in my life right now that I'm scared that I'm not going to be able to attain, that I'm scared I don't deserve, that I'm scared I will never have. So therefore, I'm trying to fill it with these other things. Mm-hmm. Or is it something of like, maybe this is the way that I feel that I'm getting what I think I deserve. For instance, there are people in relationships who don't feel worthy to be in those relationships. So they try to give gifts. They try to give things or do things to keep the other person there, hoping that those gifts will make them feel as if like, oh, this person's not going to leave me.
That one really hits home to me because my mom was I've said this on my podcast before, was a drug addict and opiate addict. And God rest her soul, she passed away 4 years ago, and I love her, but that was one of the biggest things why I actually hate gifts for me, I love giving people things, whether it be acts of service and those types of love languages of showing gratitude and appreciation and whatever it might be. But I was always getting physical gifts because she couldn't physically be there. She was like, here's a computer.
Yeah.
Here's this. I love you. And it really hits home, because when you say things like that, you know, what they're trying to earn your affection and your love by essentially giving you a physical representation of what love should be. But in reality, it was the intimate connection I was craving. And so many, I think, you or I may have read this in a book, but I think that you know this regardless. I think it's 1 in every how many children have a mother or father or parent that's a drug addict?
Oh, I don't know that.
I think it's one. I think it's 1 in every like 5 children in the United States.
Especially in the United States, it's very high. Yeah, I mean, and especially when you're talking about addiction, that then does go depending on, like, you're talking about alcohol. You know,
there's a lot of addictions,
different addictions or whatever. So I assume that number would be super high. I don't have the statistic, but what I think is really important about what you said is, like, in this moment where the world has had to slow down and they're craving intimate connections, I actually think it's caused people to be even more afraid of intimate connections. And that's just
it keeps on driving the left and the right further apart. It keeps on driving those intimate connections further apart.
This moment, unfortunately, has not done what it's supposed to be doing. But the reason being is, yes, people are Zooming more. Yes, people are finding more times to be creative. But really what's happening is that those are surface conversations. Those are all surface
like this. It's not like we want to sit down and get to the raw, most raw form of conversation. I want to learn everything that I possibly can about what makes you tick as a person and me, and let's try to meet in the middle and understand each other.
And the reason being is, for many people, and I don't like to generalize, but I hope that anyone listening to this may recognize this, because I know I've recognized it myself as well, is that as human beings, we're afraid of being judged. We're afraid of, not being the person people like. We're afraid of being told that we're not good enough. And sometimes it's not always those direct words, especially when you're talking about...
It could be indirect is what you're saying.
Indirect,
as well.
Like social interactions. You could be at a party, and the fact that people are huddled up here and not huddled around you could make you feel like you're not worthy. And these type of things start to play into why you try to stay surface, because the fear of
what social media is like, I have a Rolex, I have this, I have that.
Well,
and people, I see a lot of people at the surface level put all these things out there because they don't want to be they don't want to get that rawness out. They just want to, like, oh, he has this, he has that. That's someone I want to hang out with, rather than, let me find out about you, man. Tell me who you are.
Well, I've told you this before in our friendship. I've said one of the things that connected me to you is that one of the things that I choose for all of my friends is vulnerability. The more vulnerable someone can be from the beginning.
I appreciate that about you.
And I appreciate that about you as well. We have our sessions where we're training, and we'll be talking about some of the deepest things and then go to the silliest things as well. You know what I mean? You can be your holistic self. And I think that's where we desire to all be, but it's that fear of, if I show this side of me, will they still like me? If I show this piece of me, if I say this thing, are they gonna then judge me and then retreat from me? And I think the way that we have to first look at it, and I try to advise anyone who has this issue, is there's something called love-based decisions and fear-based decisions. And we all have to get better in our lives.
Guys, pay attention to this. Pay attention to this. This is some important stuff right here.
I'm just saying, for some it might be. But we all have to think about, are we making fear-based decisions or love-based decisions? And how can you get better in the moment of really understanding if you're making a fear-based decision or a love-based decision? And the best way for you to do that is that in a moment, when you're about to speak, and a lot of times, most of us either get super quiet because we're afraid, or we start to fill the silence with meaningless stuff because we're trying to see what sticks to the wall.
Right.
Those are the two extremes. So in those moments when
we'll just throw random things out there. Hey, this and that. Did you hear about the football game? Yeah. Hey, did you see what's on the news?
So when you see yourself about to speak, think to yourself, am I saying something because I'm afraid people are not gonna like me? Or am I saying something because I love what I'm saying and I think it will add value to this conversation?
Passion, and actual love for what they say.
Yes, and it's really practicing. You know, everything we have in life that is important to us, whether it's our self-esteem, our relationships with ourselves or others, or the way that we walk through the world, either making fear-based or love-based decisions, is through practice. You have to consciously say to yourself, in this moment, am I making a decision to actually be more vulnerable because I believe that I can actually add to it? Am I making a love-based decision, or am I making a fear-based decision? And what that does is it helps you to understand if you are ready to have the capacity to be vulnerable with people, to have those intimate connections where you're not trying to fill a void with things that don't matter, with people that don't matter. You know, one of the things that you can really evaluate if you really are ready for more intimate connections is by doing this test and seeing if you're making love-based decisions or fear-based decisions when you're talking. And I know some of the people who are the loneliest, but they're surrounded by tons of people. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the story you hear about every celebrity. You know, they have an entourage, but they still feel so lonely, still so alone. And there's a reason for that. It's because they're making this fear-based decision of, I must do certain things and give certain things to keep people around me, instead of realizing that the vulnerability and the true authentic person they are is just good enough. And it's that practicing every day saying, I'm good enough as is.
Affirmations.
Yeah, it's affirmations of saying,
but with conviction.
With conviction, yeah. And that's what will start to help you to believe that you don't have to hide behind things or screens, that you really can have intimate connections with people that are going to be beneficial to you and that other person.
That's a great point that you're making, because I've seen some of the most, again, lonely people that have the most extensive friend group. Oh, and yeah. I was when I moved here, I tried being friends with everybody, and slowly over the past 4 years, I'm like, you know what? Why do I want to be friends with everybody? I don't need to be friends with all of my clients. I don't need to be friends with everybody that I come into contact with. You know, I want to be friends with people that I actually have a same frequency with. And when I say frequency from a spiritual standpoint or a energetic standpoint, you want to be on that same wavelength and frequency of the people, but also some people have a little bit higher vibration than you. And that's the whole point of like being around people that constantly challenge you to be better, but they know at that same frequency and that same energetic level, you're vulnerable, you're authentic, and you're genuine. And that's why you connect on that same energetic level. And that's why you vibrate on that same energetic level. But when you have someone who might vibrate a little bit higher in certain aspects of their life, whether it be social standing, whether it be monetarily, whether it be running a company, whatever it might be, they want to challenge you to be your best self. And at the end of the day, that's what a true, authentic, genuine friend would do. And there's so many people that will just, hey man, let's get drunk, let's get fucked up, you want to go do drugs? Because they don't want to see your authentic, they don't even want to probably see you succeed. They probably want to see you do worse. Well, a lot of the time,
even on that example right there, that's a fear-based decision. The moment you say yes to people who only invite you around to do things that are harming you, it means that you're making a fear-based decision that you don't think you can find a healthier group, or a group that's going to be vibrating on a vibration, like you said, and that's going to benefit you. And so I'm using this as an example for people to see how they're making these decisions in their own life. Here you go right now. Look at the people who are around you and how they're talking to you. And are they actually trying to support you? And if they're not, are you constantly saying yes to the lack of support? Are you saying yes to the lack of healthy options for your life? Are you saying yes to someone who never wants to see you do better? That's where you know you're making a fear-based decision. What that fear is, whether it's loneliness, a lack of self-esteem, whatever it is, you have to be able to identify that and then practice doing the opposite.
I think we're talking about this in another social intimate setting, and elaborated a little bit about people pleasing. And I think that's what I've got caught up in the past.
You're a bit of a people pleaser. You're a people pleaser.
And I think what some of my friends have challenged me to do in the past, including you. Hey hey, man, you don't need to say yes to everything.
Listen.
Don't be always available. And yeah, you want to be available, you want to be there for people, but then it dilutes you. It dilutes what you can bring, the value of what you bring.
Don't be afraid, people, of saying the word no. No's are your friends. And, you know, again, there's so many things that I wish, you know, as a parent, I did differently. And, you know, don't get me wrong, my children are not perfect by any means. But I don't want them to be perfect, because I want them to be who they are and to have the growth and the ability to, you know, to continue to challenge themselves. But one of the things that I think about as parents or as adults we can stop doing is making people afraid of the word no. You say no, and then all of a sudden people have a negative reaction because of their own egos. And then once their ego gets involved, you start to feel like, oh, well, look, I'm disappointing this person, so let me give them a yes next time. And that's what sort of adds and plays into that people-pleasing behavior, where it's like, because I got a no that made me feel like I hurt someone, I'm gonna give that person a yes. And I never wanna see myself hurting someone. And normally that's because the empathy that you have for yourself, you wish someone would have seen you hurting. So you then, again, do these behaviors, and I'm not talking about you in general, in particular.
You're just talking about you as the people listening.
People listening. That's why you get into these patterns of people pleasing. But if you can remember that no is your friend, no's are stepping stones to take you to where you need to be.
Valuing yourself.
No's will help you to see the value in yourself. No's are such important parts of your life. And no's don't make you an asshole. They don't make you arrogant. They don't make you anything but somebody who understands the boundaries and respects their lives. I tell people before, I want you to imagine boundaries. And in this case, our boundaries are the no's. Boundaries as streetlights. If your town of who you are didn't have any streetlights, people would be running through there recklessly, crashing into stuff, doing whatever they want to do. You have to set up those no's and those boundaries so that there is order in your life, so that there is order in your town, the community of who you are. And it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. And I think that will help so many people pleasing. And listen, it's a hard thing. Again, going back to what I said before, love-based decision and fear-based decision. You got to think about, why are you doing this? Why are you afraid to say no to someone? What do you think is going to happen if you don't? And then you have to practice just doing it. You have to try something small. If someone asks you for a soda or for something small, say no to that, even though you know you could do it, because that will help you to start to practice to be able to say no for when they ask you for money or your car or something that you're like, hold on, I really need to say no to this, but I haven't practiced saying no to you, so I'm gonna get guilted into saying yes.
Mm-hmm. That's I think a typical problem that most of us as Americans find ourselves in that situation. And that's the sad part of the society that we live in today, is we're so driven to please everybody, rather. And you spoke a little bit on this about your ego, about empathy, and you also spoke about setting boundaries and value, right? So your ego plays into how we essentially want to, and your ego isn't good or bad. Your ego is who you are. But I have this quote that my Al-Anon coach has told me in the past: your ego is not your amigo. And as soon as you start thinking with your ego and you try to please everybody essentially, or even yourself, because you don't feel adequate because of this person has this and I don't, so you start having this vertical integration of Kim Kardashian. I'm not good because I don't have a 100,000 square foot house in Calabasas that has all these bedrooms. So it's essentially, what I'm trying to ask is, how would you help the audience reflecting on their ego and reflecting on how they can utilize being more conscious of who they are as a person, and I think this is the most important thing that out of 2020, 2021, this year, that we should get, is if we can collectively be more conscious and be more aware of ourselves, and then everyone as a society draws more awareness and draws more connection, draws more intimacy, and it knows their ego and how to diverge from making ego-based decisions and emotional-driven decisions and things like that, and making decisions based off of who they know they are, their
Yeah.
awareness of themselves, and being more conscious of that.
So it's interesting what you said, because awareness is something that is tricky for most people, because most people only find awareness in themselves by looking at others. And see, that's where the ego starts to find itself flourishing and driving, is when you're looking at other people. You know, one of the things that I hope your audience can hear from me today, if nothing else, is that comparison is the thief of joy. And when you compare yourself to other people, you still the joy of realizing who you are and what you have in your own life. And when you still that joy from yourself, that's when the ego starts to come up, because then you start to make these ego-based decisions, emotional decisions that are unhealthy. Those all in line, ego-based decisions, emotional-based decisions, fear-based decisions are all in line with unhealthy decisions based on this idea of, look at what other people have, look what I don't have. Look at who they are and look at what I'm not. Instead of realizing I don't need to compare myself or look at them to know who I am. I don't need to see what anyone else is doing to be aware of what I have and what I can attain in this world. And it's sad because the way, and this is, you know, sometimes I think about maybe writing another book on like parenting or how to be better adults to children. Because I think about, as we're younger, one of the markers that we have is people tell you, look at this person. You can be this person. It's a thing that we have. Every elementary school you walk into, every middle school, they have pictures of every single person. It creates
competition, which completely drives us away from being intimate,
aware,
and intimate with each other.
That's
the biggest problem that we have right now. Competition drives away intimacy.
Competition and comparison drive away intimacy. And it starts from a young age. All of these behaviors start from such a young age that we don't realize it. It's like I said before, being afraid of no's, and how that affects us having intimate relationships, and how it affects us really collecting more things than we need. How comparison and competition start to affect us from really being aware of who we are and how beautiful our lives are and how beautiful the skills that we have are and how beneficial they are to the world. I even think something about, you know, this is a little off topic, but kind of similar, is parenting, or just adulting. If a child says something or tells you the truth when they've done something bad, most people's reaction is to still punish them. So I want you to think about that. And this goes into intimate relationships now. With any couples out there, married, whatever, friendships, think about this. You want somebody to be honest and vulnerable with you at all times. That's something that's scary for 99.9% of all of us as human beings.
They're afraid that we'll lose that person.
You're afraid you'll lose that person. So then when they are honest, though they may have made actions that weren't showing you or didn't make you feel valued, they were honest. Once they are honest, do you punish them? Or do you say, okay, I respect the honesty?
And I'll try to understand where you're coming from with this decision, the action that you took.
Exactly. And this is never to excuse repeat bad behavior, because that's a clear thing. Repeat bad behavior is disrespect. But if someone is afraid to be vulnerable or has this idea that they can't be vulnerable and they can't connect with you because of the way that they were groomed as a child or just as part of the society, you have to be able to like consciously say, hold on, in this moment, let me not react in the way that we're all usually have people react to us when we are honest. Again, I think it's the craziest thing that you tell your kids every single day. Be honest, tell the truth, tell the truth. They mess up and then they tell you the truth. And then it's like, I'm gonna spank you, I'm going to punish you, I'm gonna take away something. What are you reinforcing? You're reinforcing
them to lie.
Don't tell the truth, because if you really want this thing, if you want your freedom, if you want a connection with me that's not gonna be damaged, then you have to be perfect. And so you do that, and then you end up messing with the child's idea of how they can be intimate and vulnerable with other people. And so again,
perpetuates the society that we live in today.
Just all of these things.
And that's why it keeps on driving away intimate connection.
Exactly. And then why people start to continue to collect things that they don't need because they're afraid to just sit in with who they are, be aware of who they are, and truly start to love who they are and focus on their mental health. These things are all connected. And I think it's about inspiring, if nothing else from this conversation, I'd want someone out there to realize that you can find one person in your life that you can be vulnerable with, and use that as a marker on how you can then go through every other relationship. And try to use that, because once you find vulnerability with one person, once you find that honesty, you find that ability to not be judged, it's a beautiful thing. When someone is not gonna say to you, ooh, that's who you are? That's what you've done? When they're gonna be like, all right, I respect you. Again, never trying to say that repeat bad behavior is something you should replace with intimacy or confuse with intimacy. It's about someone who's saying, I'm constantly trying to grow and be better. I want to be better with you, and I don't want to surround my life with a whole bunch of people or crap that doesn't matter. I want to focus on my mental health, and I know key part of that is me becoming more aware of myself, but I can only do that if I can be honest and intimate with you.
So last question, if we're going to take the big takeaway from our conversation today, is we talked about intimacy, we talked about trying to make the delta that keeps on driving people away from intimacy closer, trying to grow. And if we can take anything from this tipping point that you alluded to before about 2021, people were like, election, I'm gonna grow, I'm gonna be better. Nope, that's just a date.
Yeah.
January 1st, I'm gonna grow, I'm gonna be better. Oh shit, that's just another date.
Yeah.
It's just a date on the calendar. For you to actually grow and make actual, genuine, authentic change in your life, what would you recommend as the savant, the expert? I respect that you are, that I've seen in multiple intimate gatherings that you've brought about. What would you recommend for the audience listening to actually grow from this year, actually have that tipping point that will make them flourish and will make them grow, and they'll actually get growth out of from a physical, a mental, a spiritual standpoint?
I would say patience and persistence. And the first part of that is being patient with yourself. This is your journey. You only got about, if you're lucky, 100 years to walk this journey. And unfortunately, we become impatient with ourselves. Then we become impatient with other people because we want them to grow at the level we want them to grow at. We feel like we should be growing faster. And sometimes you don't have the tools. But be patient with yourself and know you will get there. And that's where persistence comes in. Persistence of making sure that every single day you do one little thing. Just trying to learn a little bit more, be a little bit better. No one's expecting you to change overnight, and anyone who does expect you to change overnight is unrealistic. It's the same thing like we talked about addiction. We briefly touched on addiction, or we talked about soldiers, we talked about all these things. When people come back from any situation that has affected them mentally, emotionally, or physically, you just don't heal over it. You know this better than anyone, as someone who understands the body. You can't change the body overnight. It takes time. It takes patience with yourself,
frequency,
and persistence. And I think if people can do those things, be patient with themselves and be persistent, then they will get there. They will be able to be more vulnerable and have better conversations.
How would you challenge the listener to be patient?
Yeah, well, it's practice, and this is the thing.
This is from someone who I was the most impatient person growing up my whole life, waiting for someone, being my mom, a drug addict, to change. Yeah. And I had to just be, I have to be patient. It might take the rest of her life, but I have to.
Well, impatience usually comes from our expectations. And when our expectations aren't met, then you get impatient with somebody. And this is something we all work on, some more than others. But if you expect somebody to already know something, this is why some people can't be teachers, because you expect a child or an adult to get a concept that came easy to you quickly. And you're like, hold on, how do you not understand 1 + 1 = 2? I've explained it to you 4 times. And that's because you're expecting them to get something instead of being patient with them and understanding that they're different. So if you remove your expectations for others and remove the expectations for yourself, then you can start to find that patience. You can start to say, hey, you know what? I don't have to expect myself to know it all. I don't have to expect myself to be the best person. I don't have to expect myself to be perfect. I know that I can be better each day. My granny used to say to me, never be afraid of standing still. I mean, of growing slowly, only of standing still. And I always thought that was very interesting to me, of like, she would be like, no, just keep going. Slower, fast, whatever. You do this with me when we're training. Sometimes I'll be like in it, and other times I'm like, this is difficult. And you'll say, then do 2, do 3. It then takes the expectation out of my mind that I have to do all 8 or 10. I can continue.
You get it.
I can continue to be better. And so anyone listening, be patient with yourself. Be patient with others. Don't have an expectation, and then be persistent in just trying, continuing on. That's why, again, I think that what you're doing is so special, of making sure people understand that the body and the mind are connected.
Yes, and that's my purpose.
In such a clear way, because when those things are connected and when you understand both, your life is beautiful. It's like chemistry. That's why we're here with the body chemists, okay? It's beautiful. You know, it's like magic. You know what I'm saying? So it works.
We had a great conversation today, man. This conversation was truly amazing. And like you said earlier, like you alluded to, the mind, the body, and the spirit, if we can truly connect that triad together of what people, I think, lack of. People just think mind, body, spirit. They think that they're all separate. But when you can truly join those things together, we're truly gonna drive that delta that's so far apart right now, that's so lacking of intimacy, that's so high of expectations of others and themselves, that they'll truly let their ego go. They'll truly be more conscious and more aware of themselves. And what you said, they'll start practicing patience and persistence, and that's what growth is about.
Amen, brother.
Thank you guys for coming to the Body Chem Cast. Thank Karamo. Thank you, man.
My brother.
I am so happy that you came in. And everyone listen, it's gonna be on YouTube, it's gonna be on Instagram. We'll share it. I'm sure Karamo will share it. And man, you guys are gonna learn a lot. Thank you for coming. Signing out of the Body Chem Cast, where you learn about the science behind strength in the mind, body, and spirit.